Hello again and welcome back to the channel. This is Michael from TOEFLresources.com, and in today's video I want to share with you everything that is wrong and misleading in the official guide to the TOEFL. Yes, I have been spending a lot of time over the past few weeks reading the 5th edition of the official guide. This is the most recent edition and it was published in 2017. However, it does have a few mistakes. Now, I do really like this book and I do recommend it to all of my students. However, whenever I make that recommendation, I do have to give them the warning about the mistakes. So in today's video, I want to give all of you guys the same warning so that you can use this book a bit more efficiently when you study for the TOEFL. So let's get started by talking about the chapters in the book about the reading and listening sections of the test. Now, the good news is that the book is really strong when it comes to reading and listening. I didn't spot a single mistake in the chapter on listening. In the chapter on reading, I spotted just one tiny mistake, and that is that each of the practice reading sets have 13 questions. That is 13 questions for each reading passage. On the real test, you're going to get 14 questions. Again, that's not a big deal, but I mention it here so you can be a bit more prepared for the real test and so that you won't get any surprises. Next up, let's talk about the speaking section of the test. And this chapter does have a couple of misleading parts that I think are pretty serious. And they have to do with speaking questions 1 and 2. So I want to take a minute to just read to you the description of speaking question 1. The book says, for this task, you will be asked to speak about a person, place, object, or event that is familiar to you. And that's all it says as far as what kind of question you could get. However, that's a little bit misleading. On the real test, you could be asked to speak about a person, place, object, or event that is familiar, but you could be asked to do something totally different. Now, I'm going to put a link in the video description to my website, which will tell you a bit more about this question. But basically, be prepared to answer a question about giving advice to a friend who's facing some familiar situation, or be prepared to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of some specific option or choice. That's not mentioned in the book. Likewise, for speaking question 2, the book is misleading. Here's what it says. In this second independent speaking task, you will be presented with 2 possible actions, situations, or opinions. Then you will be asked to say which of the actions or situations you think is preferable. Yes, that's true. You might be given 2 choices. However, on the real test, you might be given 3 choices. Be prepared for that. Likewise, you might merely be presented with a statement and asked whether you agree or disagree with that. That's not something the book makes perfectly clear. I think these changes or these differences are pretty serious, and a lot of students who only use the book are surprised on test day because they get a question they weren't expecting. So I don't want you to be surprised. I want you to be confident. So read the links in the video description. Next, the writing chapter of the book. Now, if you guys have been watching my videos, you know writing is the section I really focus on. And frankly, this chapter of the book, in my opinion, is absolutely terrible. It's wrong from beginning to end. And when I'm working one-on-one with a student, I tell them just to skip that chapter of the book and just use my own resources instead. Let's go into detail, though, about what's wrong with this chapter. First of all, the sample integrated writing question on pages 196 to 198 is totally wrong. It has a completely different structure than the real test. On the real test, the article will have an introduction and then 3 body paragraphs. Each body paragraph makes a specific argument. But in the textbook, there's just 2 gigantic paragraphs. And that's never used on the real test. Likewise, the points made in the lecture do cast doubt on the points made in the article, but they're in like the wrong order. They don't match up like on the real test. Basically, don't use that question. It's just terrible. Don't use it. I beg you. Likewise, page 198 of the book suggests that the lecture might actually support the reading, but it will not. That's just not a pattern that has been used on the test for as long as I can remember. Finally, pages 217 to 220 contain 40 sample independent questions. However, about 12 of those questions are in styles not used on the real test. On the real test, you're going to get an agree-disagree question, you're going to get a preference question, or you're going to get a multiple choice question. But 12 of the questions in the book don't fit either, or they don't fit those 3 patterns. So that's a problem. Now, the good news is the book used to have 180 sample independent questions, and almost all of them were wrong. So the 5th edition is better, but it still does have some misleading questions. Make sure you know the real style of the questions in the independent writing section by reading the article I'm going to link to in the description of this video. Lastly, let's talk about the 4 sample tests in the book. The good news is that most of the tests are just fine. I like them a lot. However, please be aware that practice test number 1 contains an integrated writing question that does not match the real test. Again, the points in the reading and the lecture just don't match up in the same style as the real test. They're really not even close. That's the one about altruism, if you've been reading the transcripts of the book. Basically, don't use it. I want you to skip that part of practice test 1. As I said, though, practice tests 2, 3, and 4, totally fine. Use them as much as you can. Study them as much as you can. They will help you prepare for the test. Okay, that's all I have to say about the official guide to the TOEFL, but you can find me on the usual social networking sites. And as always, you can find me at TOEFLresources.com. If you visit that site, you will find guides to every section of the test, and you can sign up to have your practice essays evaluated by me. I'll give you detailed feedback about your grammar and your vocabulary and your structure. It's a service I really love providing to students. I'm going to leave it at that, but if you have any questions about this book or any questions about any other book, please leave them down below and I will answer them as soon as I can. All right, guys, take care, and I'll see you next week with a new video about the TOEFL.